Deaf people, what did you think made a sound, but later found out actually doesn't? I always thought butterflies made a soft, fluttering sound when they fly, but it turns out they're silent little ninjas. I have a deaf sister. A few years ago, she got cochlear implants. On top of that, she's a runner. So my sister was very surprised to learn that her chest doesn't make any sound bouncing while she runs. I remember a teacher of deaf students saying he had to gather the class and explain to them that people can hear them fart. I'm not fully deaf, I just hear very poorly. My older brother spent almost 40 years convincing me that silence isn't actually silent. He kept repeating phrases like, the sound of silence, and the silence is deafening. And I was firmly convinced that a moment with no sound at all simply didn't exist. When I finally got a hearing aid, I quickly realized what those phrases actually mean, and I felt like a complete idiot. My silence is never quiet. I have tinnitus. My uncle is deaf. When he first got a hearing aid, he was shocked and puzzled that refrigerators make a sound. And it also amazed him that trees, on the other hand, are silent. He knew wind rustles in the leaves, but he thought the trees themselves made a sound too, because he'd read so many times about the sound of the trees. He said he expected some kind of hum or vibration from them. In an old forest, you actually can hear the trees swaying, bending, and creaking. When I first got a hearing aid, I realized I could go months without noticing the exhaust fan I'd forgotten to turn off. And I had no idea my kitten was such a chatterbox. I'm deaf, and I often have those moments of, whoa, that makes a sound. It's rarer to go the other way. Although the other day I was messing with the printer and moved something, thinking it was supposed to make noise. I asked, and it turned out it doesn't. I was confused. I love figuring out what makes a sound and what doesn't. And the conclusion from all of it? You hearing people live in a very noisy world. But we get used to those background sounds, and the brain learns to filter them out. Since I was a teenager, I've sometimes deliberately sat still and strained my hearing to count how many different sounds I can hear. It's surprising when you suddenly realize you've been filtering out distant traffic, a bird singing, or the hum of a fan. I'm not deaf, but I have hearing problems. I lived with it for a long time and didn't realize how much I was missing. Then I finally got a hearing aid. What surprised me most was how loud the world actually is. Ordinary sounds that I'd either forgotten or never really heard suddenly came alive. For example, when I went out for a walk, I was blown away by how many birds were singing all around me. Even the crunch of gravel under my shoes and the rustle of leaves in the wind seemed almost deafening at first. I realized just how used to filtering all of it out and mistaking it for silence my brain had become. My cousin was absolutely certain the sun makes a sound. When he got a hearing aid, he went outside, and it was quiet. He actually felt some relief. Your cousin was right. If sound waves could travel through space, the noise from the sun would be deafening. It really is incredibly loud, we just can't hear it because of the vacuum of space. Snow. I have a deaf friend who learned that rain and wind make sounds, and figured snow must too. She was shocked when it finally snowed here, and it turned out that snow is completely silent as it falls. But she did love the crunch it makes when you step on it. The funny thing is, when a lot of snow falls, it actually gets noticeably quieter outside. Heavy snowfall works like soundproofing. Each snowflake absorbs part of the sound wave's energy, and when the air is full of them, it becomes kind of muffled. I volunteer as an interpreter at events at a school for the deaf, and for over 2 years I've worked with one boy who recently got a hearing aid. One time I yawned, and he was very surprised that it was almost silent. He thought I was supposed to make a sound like a. I heard a story about a guy who didn't understand that people knock on doors. He just thought it was magic, or incredible luck, that someone would be at the door at the exact moment his mom opened it. About 10 years ago, I had a deaf neighbor. She showed me and my friend her doorbell system. She had a doorbell, but instead of a sound, it flashed lights in a certain rhythm. My older brother is deaf. When he got a hearing aid, he called me in a panic. The guy didn't know that wind passing through leaves makes a sound. He thought there was something wrong with his hearing aid. I had to explain what that noise was. It was hilarious. My sister is deaf, and she absolutely loves cats. One of my favorite memories? She takes my hand and places it on the ribs of a purring cat. I don't know if she's aware that purring can often be heard, but I'm definitely not going to tell her. The joy she gets from that tactile sense of a happy animal is pure bliss. In college, there was a guy who used to be deaf and then got implants. He was surprised that light bulbs don't make a sound. He'd just assumed they must make some kind of noise. Well, some of them make a background. Bzzz, God, I hate that sound. I'm deaf myself. I've worn a hearing aid for about a year and a half. Every time I get a new hearing aid, I discover things I never knew made a sound. A couple of examples. When I was in my early 20s, I didn't know that moving my hair, when I push it away from my hearing aid, makes a sound. Or that the wind whistles while you're driving in a car. Or that my dog's collar tag taps against the car window. When I was around 25, I got a new hearing aid. And I was shocked to learn that the air conditioner makes a sound when it starts blowing. I never knew that. I'm not deaf, but I worked with someone who was deaf from birth. On top of that, he had schizophrenia. He said he could hear his auditory hallucinations. What does that even mean? I still can't wrap my head around it. Actually, it's not uncommon among deaf people, especially after you take out your hearing aid at night. Because of the lack of incoming signals, the brain can create auditory hallucinations, but he probably had more of them, since he was also schizophrenic. My neighbor got an implant as a teenager. Before that, someone had told him that fire crackles slightly, and for some reason, he decided that water must make the same sound. When I was getting married, my ex-husband's cousin, who is deaf, offered to film the wedding. Why not? He didn't notice any of the sounds his 2-year-old daughter was making while he held her in his arms, standing right next to the video camera. I grew up with a deaf brother and sister. My brother lost his hearing at 13 from scarlet fever, so he knew what things sounded like, but over 27 years he forgot everything. The whole time he was 97% deaf, and then he got bilateral cochlear implants. He didn't know, or had forgotten, that cabinets make sounds. He opened and closed one squeaky cabinet for 10 minutes straight. He'd forgotten about birdsong, and then one morning he sat outside and listened to all those sounds in amazement. Getting the implants is a process. The results aren't instant, since they spend several months tuning them. He'd wear them for a few hours and then take them off. He said at first everything sounded like an old speak and spell talking toy from the 70s or 80s. After 6 months, his hearing level reached about 85%. It wasn't really that he assumed something made a sound when it actually didn't. He'd just forgotten that certain things make sound, because he'd gone so long without experiencing them. Wind. Sure, I'd read that it makes noise, but it wasn't until I turned 16 and got a fancy hearing aid that actually worked that I realized just how loud wind is. I've been deaf since birth, and for me, it was the opposite. When I got my latest hearing aid a couple of years ago, I heard myself pee for the first time. For over 40 years, I had no idea that urine makes a sound coming out of you, until it happened. I have a friend who's deaf, but now has cochlear implants. We met up for coffee once, and a minute after we walked into the building, it started pouring rain. We went up to the top floor and chatted for a couple of minutes, but she kept looking around, clearly confused by something. Then she asked, "What's that sound? The air conditioner, or is something broken?" She'd been here before, so she knew the usual background noise of the place. It took me a moment to realize that the sound she didn't recognize was the pouring rain drumming on the flat ceiling above us. My parents are deaf. My mom got cochlear implants. And one of the funniest discoveries for her was that she makes sounds in public restrooms. She didn't know that her pee makes a sound and that gas echoes so loudly. She was also surprised to hear people in neighboring stalls using the toilet too. She also learned how annoying a ticking clock can be, and the clicking of a dog's claws on hardwood or tile. When people first get implants, they need time to learn to filter out sounds. I worked at a school for deaf children. One of the teachers had to explain to his class of 10-year-olds that yes, a fart does make a sound. I have a friend who can't smell. When we were in college, we were sitting in a packed lecture hall. He stood up, farted, and went for a stroll around the room. I shouted, You're about to spread your fart all over the lecture hall. And he goes, wait, does it spread? Turns out he hadn't known this crucial piece of information for over 20 years and had been gassing people that whole time without even realizing it. I'm genuinely deaf. And for a long time I had really crappy hearing aids. Here are some of my examples. Fingertips touching something. Pressure doesn't always come with a sound. Weird. Wind blowing through a hedge or bushes. I thought it would be like the plants screaming at each other or arguing loudly. But no. Cats walking around, they're actually very quiet. Running water. There's only a sound when it hits something. On its own, it doesn't make one. The buttons on a TV remote? Maybe it depends on the model. The thing that props a screen door open, with a tube and a narrower, longer tube. I always thought that when the door opened, that thing made the sound. Then I realized people were hearing the door itself rattle. Changing channels on a TV looks like it should make some kind of sound, a click or a whoosh, but no. Stretching rubber bands, hair ties, and so on. By feel and by look, it seems like there should be a sound, but there isn't. Weird. Erasers and rubber bands don't make a sound when you use them. I always thought that in class, when I erased something, I was loudly announcing to everyone, I made a mistake. But no. Plugging something into an outlet or unplugging it. When I found out there's no mechanical sound confirming the plug is in and seated snugly, I was furious. How can there be no sound for that? Same thing with plugs slipping out of jacks, like back in the modem days, or when an Ethernet cable comes a little loose and the connection goes bad. How can there be no beep beep signals? Check this thing. It's mind-blowing. Braiding hair. I thought it would be noisy, but it turns out it's almost silent. Thanks so much for watching. In the comments under the video, deaf people, write what you thought made a sound, but later found out actually doesn't. And don't forget to check out our other videos. Big hug. Bye.